webinar channel. My name is Deja Miller, and I am the marketing manager here at ASETS. Today, we are hosting a webinar with our fabulous partner, Kindato, and we'll be discussing transforming data governance. Before we get started, please know that we are always happy to take your questions. So if you have any, please submit them in the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen. All questions are anonymous. If you would like a copy of today's slide deck, it can be downloaded from the resource widget also located at the bottom of your screen. Without further delay, I am pleased to introduce Jason Velasco, who will be presenting today. Take it away, Jason.
Hi, Deja. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Jason Velasco. I'm the founder and CEO of Kindato, and we'll talk a little bit about who we are in just a moment. But I'd like to first and foremost introduce my colleague Jeff Tuish. So, Jeff, why don't you come and say hi?
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Jeff Tuish, and I work for Gimmal. Been with Gimmal for about 2.5 years. We were a company called Sherpa Software, acquired by Gimmal in May of 2021. I was one of the founding members of Sherpa. Actually, my original product I wrote was the catalyst for starting Sherpa back in 2000. So I've been doing information governance for about the past 25 years.
Is that it, Jeff? I mean, that's about as long as it's been around. So, same with me, right? I've been in this space now for, 20 plus years and dealing with e-discovery and information governance issues. So I guess let me quickly introduce myself, and then we'll talk a little bit about Kindato and why you're along with us. So I've been in the e-discovery space now for, about 20 plus years. And that's really kind of led to a full career in information governance and dealing primarily with legacy data, investigations, data processing. And I spent a lot of my time working both at the e-discovery provider side, as well as working in-house, working with large regulated organizations like Deutsche Bank and a few other ones as a long-term contractor. So I've had a lot of kind of both in-house experience as well as kind of in the trenches experience on the provider side. And so we wanted to introduce everyone to Kindato. And why we're going to be talking about Kindato is especially around our relationship with Gimmal. We recently partnered with Gimmal earlier this year to develop some programs and technology dealing with information governance on the technology side. But and why that's important is because Kindato ourselves, we are a professional services organization primarily. And so what we do is we work with organizations really in as a boutique consulting firm, really helping people with their e-discovery, information governance, and their M365 implementation work. And so as we were starting to talk to clients about some of the challenges around information governance, data migrations, and how you tie those into information governance initiatives, DSARs, data subject access requests and public requests for like FOIA and other type of records requests, and the M365 e-discovery piece, which has really been the core of our focus. We really were looking for a technology partner to really help us along those ways, which is why we were introduced and have been working with Gimmal for the last year to bring those up. So thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the partnership and the collaboration around that. So, we wanted to talk about in this presentation is how the joint offering of Kindato and Gimmal on the services and the technology side is really helping people transform and having a different perspective around the information governance marketplace.
So, hey, Jason, out of these four that I'm showing on the screen here, which one do you believe is the most requested of these four? They're all vital, but I was just curious if one's more requested than another.
I think right now our focus and the most requested one that we're dealing with is really on the information governance side. But information governance is pretty broad definition, right? So in some cases, I include e-discovery and the DSAR piece related to the information governance. Because again, if you're thinking about information governance, you're thinking about the entire data lifecycle. From how do you preserve it to how do you retain it, how do you get rid of it, how do you continue to get value out of it, and the data migrations and the public records request as well as the e-discovery piece are really a big piece of that. One of the areas that I'm really enjoying working on is around the M365 e-discovery piece. I think there's some really good opportunities for clients that have invested in Microsoft 365 to leverage the power and the tools to continue to support their e-discovery programs.
So for DSARs, I know that GDPR in Europe obviously is very, very popular. And we've all seen the fines that have been levied. But are you seeing DSARs starting to get any traction here in the States?
We're starting to see people deal with those. Most of those have been around the big tech firms. Like if you go to Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook, you can actually, file and submit a data subject access request to find which information's out there. So I think larger organizations are very aware of it and have been planning for it since GDPR has come in place. I've not seen it as much with some of the other public companies, but people are thinking about it. And my experience has really been on the public records side, because they have a mandate to respond to records requests, and each state and each organization has a very different workflow for dealing public records. So it really matches up to almost like the e-discovery workflow without the defensibility challenges.
Right. So SLED then is probably the vertical market that's most requesting the DSARs in public records.
Yeah, the SLED Fed market, well, primarily SLED is who we've been working with, because they're the ones that really have the most challenges. In many cases, they'll have the G3 or G5 or the licenses as part of their Microsoft implementation, and we'll work with them to kind of streamline that using some automation techniques. In fact, we built a little, we built a SaaS-based platform on top of Microsoft 365 that kind of automates the communication all within Teams, which is something that we're doing some alpha testing on right now.
Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about Kindato services. And so we talked about the life cycle of data, and that's really where we fit in. And then again, we're very much a boutique firm. So, we like to go very deep and work with clients and really get into the heart of their problems. But as you can see here, our life cycle is starting from how do you actually implement and manage an information governance. And we'll help people either evaluate, create policies. Again, we're not lawyers, so we're not going to go through the legal side, but we do have enough experience around the records management and creating classification and really helping people with both the technical side, but as well as helping really understand the purpose of really having an information governance program. And then from there, once we actually define and create those policies, we've got to then classify the data that's out there, which is we'll use intelligence, based on that, using either AI or rules-based tools to address their legacy data and help them really help them make it either get rid of it or make it more valuable. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we talk about the Gimmal solutions.
So can you tell me more about the IG programs? I mean, what does that comprise?
Well, I think the IG programs typically that we're going to work with is going to be around legacy data, whether it's tape data, whether it's antiquated systems. In some cases, it's going to be compliance archives, as people are evaluating what the compliance archives are going to be dealing with. A lot of it is assessing, and we'll talk a little bit about assessments in a moment, but really assessing what their current states are, helping them look at their records policies, determine whether they're up to spec, or in some cases, we'll actually provide a fractional role where if they don't have a resources, we can actually step in and help those organizations as needed to kind of support those either as a managed service or a fractional leadership role.
So compliance archives, can you speak to that a little bit more, exactly what that is?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of the organizations, especially the colleagues that I've had over the years in the financial services space, have invested tons and tons of money. I don't even put a number value to it, but tons and tons of money of implementing email and communication records programs, especially because they've had to, right? They're regulated industries. Now, as the technology is changing and as the rules are looking at how do you actually manage the compliance archives of those, there's still going to be a need for that. But the question is how does that integrate with some of the new technologies out there, especially around the Microsoft 365 environments? And so, with our experience with either, building or implementing or evaluating compliance archives, we'll work with our clients in terms of really understanding kind of what they currently have, looking at kind of the current rules, regulations that they have to deal with from a compliance archive, determine what the next steps are in terms of what are the things that they need to do in order to continue maintenance in light of the new technologies that are evolving, especially with things like Slack and Teams and all the other Trello and Jira and all the different technologies that are out there, which are communication platforms. How do you supply with those from a compliance archive perspective?
So is there a particular department that's leading the charge for companies on this, or do you see a varied number like IT, security, legal, risk?
The ones we work with mostly are going to probably be are usually legal and IT.
Okay.
Usually legal is driving it. They're the owners of the need. All right, they're the ones that are defining the requirements at the regulatory perspective, or what they need to do to be in compliance with their entire business. So they're the ones that are on the hook for that, and sometimes that's compliance, and sometimes that's legal. So it depends on, again, the type of organization that you're dealing with. But at the end of the day, IT is usually responsible for the implementation of this.
Oh,
and so
sure.
right. So we tend to be, and this is kind of where I've built my career, which is being that translator that speaks both legal and nerd. And so you can kind of bring those two pieces together and kind of help make sure that both parties, which speak very different languages, can communicate properly together.
Nice.
And I think that ties nicely when you think about it, and it comes down to how do the business units and the people at the departmental level actually use it, which ties into our knowledge and content management offerings as well. And as my business partner Michael always likes to say, it's content management, knowledge management. It's really about finding the right data for the right person at the right time. And that includes security, access, labeling, taxonomies. How do you actually pull all those pieces together so that you can continue the life cycle of once you have to do the finding of the data for the e-discovery. And again, we focus a lot on that Microsoft 365 piece, but how do you respond to litigation or internal investigations or public records requests around that? And again, how does that finding of the data inform creating and enhancing the policies that are out there? So this is a continuous process.
Yep.
And so, we typically always start with some level of an assessment, whether it's IG programs, looking at an organization's IG programs holistically, as well as their e-discovery programs. We mentioned compliance archives. We've started helping people a lot over the last year or so with helping them around their IG and e-discovery readiness around Microsoft 365. And the other cool thing that we have to do, because we seem to be, we're pretty independent in our mindset, we work with both technology and service providers in the space, as well as clients, to evaluate what is the current state of the technology. How do actually providers and technology service providers actually, what can they do to meet their market needs in the client space? So we can really bring kind of a voice of the client back to the service market and technology market. But at the same time, we're also working with the client base to really understand what their needs are, so we can communicate that back and forth.
There's so many moving parts on all this, Jason, that you have to get your arms around. And this is a really nice list of everything that needs to be done.
Yeah, and just recently, as you and I have been working pretty closely together over the last few months, Jeff, and what we've started doing is building the assessments around legacy data, ROT analysis, and migration readiness, which we'll talk a little bit more as we talk about the technology. That's something that we're working with you guys on pretty closely. So, Jeff, as we continue to talk, people never like to see how the sausage is made. They just want it. As we talked about, people want the right data for the right person at the right time, but that's pretty hard to do, right? And so as part of our offering, we created the data factory, if you would, right? Which is taking the legacy data that's out there, and you guys focus a lot on Documentum and OpenText and a lot of other different data sources. From your perspective, we've done a lot with SharePoint on-prem and some other legacy data sources, even including some backup tape systems, and trying to convert that and use that. But then what we'll do is we'll create those assessments, we'll help build those policies and scope those out, and then it goes to the real heart of things. You either do the migrations, you're applying those policies, you're eliminating all the rot, which is redundant, obsolete, or some people call it outdated, as some of our friends like to call it, and trivial data. So we'll get rid of that, as well as applying those tagging and labeling back to the data set within the tenant of Microsoft 365. And then at that point, we're really enabling the modern work opportunity in Microsoft 365, right? There's so many cool things that are, and the opportunities that Microsoft is bringing to us related to the different tool sets, how you actually manage your data. And I can spend another whole webinar talking about those opportunities. But the opportunity with Copilot, which is their AI engine that's going to be integrated in all those type of into the entire stack, is really cool. But all of the knowledge management, content lifecycle, automation, AI possibilities, integrating with teams and all of your documents. It's such a cool opportunity. And this is really a continual lifecycle around that. So this is our data factory.
Yeah, so there are so many departments and companies anymore, but looking at this, I would hazard a guess that most every department's going to be involved in this somehow.
Yes, at some point in time, but typically my experience is once you start getting buy-in from the appropriate stakeholders, and you do need executive level stakeholders, because if the C-suite or the people that are responsible for managing both the budget and the rules aren't telling people in the trenches to say this is important, it's never going to get done. People have the way that they want to work, and they're going to stick with it, right?
Yeah.
So
how do you see this changing in the future? Do you?
Again, I think the opportunity with Microsoft 365 is pretty significant because with the modern work opportunity, so here's what happens, right? So you start giving people carrots, which is, okay, if you follow this process, if you enable us or give us information around these tags, now we can make better automation about finding similar documents. Now you're getting a better process workflow, and you get people starting to use the system in the appropriate way. So the training aspect of this is really, really huge. This is not just, here's some policies, here's your data set, here are your rules, go forth, right? It's how do you build that adoption within the organization and really evangelizing that within the organization. So typically what I will do is I will find some departments that are happy to be flag bearers. Sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's the kind of the frontline organizations that are working with clients, or people that are managing the knowledge base support, or even the development crew to kind of start building those kind of workflows. And then from there, you start spreading it out. There's the famous book Traction, which basically it's like, I took the adage of solve one problem for one client, and what happens is that will spread over time. And that's what we try to do, is we try to focus on one group to really give them a lot of value.
And this is not a one and done thing, because those policies are going to be living, breathing, evolving organisms that are going to go on forever.
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct.
Yes.
So it's pretty exciting stuff. Yeah, you're never finished. So I wanted to introduce this, and then we'll transition a little bit to you, Jeff, talk about some of this. But the first thing that we started looking at the Gimmal technology and our partnership was, we thought there was a really cool opportunity to do what we call migration as a service, and which is, how do you actually create a service line around it? And I mean, this is pretty cool, right? Which is, you guys have a really cool migration tool, which you'll share in just a minute. But we looked at it as there's 3 different levels of migrations that are out there, right? You have your kind of typical lift shift. If I've got a terabyte of data, I'm going to move a terabyte of data, right? So I'm going to move it from OpenText, I'm going to use it to M365 or Box or whatever the technology is. And then you can do filtered migrations, which is now you start adding some of those rules and policies, and that maybe be a way of kind of triaging that. And then there's some really cool opportunities to use AI and other intelligence to be able to kind of take some data, start doing sampling using some of the tools, large language models that are out there to really help do that. And typically what we do is we build this offering around assessments, do some analysis around that, helping really evaluate their policies, procedures, trying to understand where content lifecycle management fits in there and how physical records ties together, and then putting that all together as a service. So it's really mass plus IG if you look at it. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for all of the work and help and support that you've done in building this program.
Oh, sure. So I'm curious, what is the main reason why people are migrating? Is it to change technologies? Is it a cost issue? Both? Yes, yeah.
A lot of it is they've selected a new technology, especially around the file share or file server side of things, or a document management system of some sort. And now they've got to move those investments, right? This seems to be this stage where there's been some really big there's kind of a transitional setup within the technology stacks that are out there with Microsoft 365 and some of the other technology. So people are looking at their legacy systems now and then trying to figure out, what do I do with that data, right? And so those are some of the, the opportunities there now to do that. So, we say you're going to be migrating anyway. So why not just, add a little bit of time and budget to this and really make it intelligent, which is what we try to encourage and advise for all of our clients and prospects.
And obviously, after the migration's done, doesn't mean that data is now stagnant. It's going to be dynamic as well and still need managing by something.
Yeah, and so there's so many complexities now, and one of the things that we really liked about your tool is how you actually manage the versioning and some of these dynamic documents that are out there. So that's some really cool stuff. So, Jeff, thank you for asking the questions. Why don't we turn the tables a little bit and let's talk about Gimmal. So,
hot seat time. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, before we jump into that, folks, if you've got questions, comments, or whatever, throw those in the chat. And I know Deja's kind of keeping an eye on that, and we would love to be able to ask your questions. So if you answer your questions, so if you've got something, throw it out there. We'll get to it in real time. So, Jeff, tell us about Gimmal.
So Gimmal started out in about 20 years ago as a consulting service company, but over time, we have evolved into a product and services. We still perform services around our products. And we have, and you're going to see, we have a full information governance suite of products that can help manage the full life cycle of your data, which is the key. Because as we were talking, Jason, once data is in a particular data source, like we move it to SharePoint, for instance, that doesn't mean it's done being managed. The work is continuing forever. You have to constantly manage all that data. Like we were talking about the lift and shift earlier. If you're going to just take your data and move it from one place to another, is that a valid reason? Sure, you can do it that way, but we both recommend you've got to put some intelligence around that. And that's one of the things we're helping with, is that information and governance, to be able to give you some intelligence around your data.
Yeah, and so I mean, you guys have kind of built your product suite around simplifying IG. So tell me a little bit about how. I mean, this is a pretty comprehensive stack. Could you kind of share with us some of the different technologies that you have available to help clients?
Yeah, you're going to see the picture on the left there with our 5 major products that we have. And we have a 6th one in here as well that came over from Sherpa called Discovery Attender. But you're going to go down through these. So basically what we're doing here is we're managing the electronic records with Records Discover, Link, and Migrate, and then the physical records management with our Gimmal Physical product. So both the types of records are being managed by these. So Migrate obviously is going to, we'll be talking about that, migrating from another platform like OpenText or Documentum into SharePoint. Link can help with SAP links, as it says down there, to be able to use SharePoint to access SAP. Discover, Records, and Physical have a lot of commonality between them. Physical is once again doing the physical records. Discover and Records have some synergy because they actually can work together well in managing the information governance lifecycle.
Well, and people often forget about the paper side of things, and I mean, it's huge, right? I mean,
it's huge.
We were talking to a mutual client last week, and they had like 20,000 boxes of records, right? I mean, that's pretty huge, right? And the technology challenges are immense in terms of trying to manage that. So, how does Gimmal Physical help support that?
Oh, it allows you to know exactly where that box is and what's in it. So whenever you need access to that data, you don't have to be sorting through your closet looking for that one shirt that you're hoping to wear. Everything is already very, very well organized with that. There's a check-in and check-out. It's a phenomenal system to help manage physical records.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the capabilities, and so many people forget about that and how it actually ties into the information governance lifecycle. So,
the warehouses of records, Jason, just is amazing, amazing.
Right. Yeah, and coming back from my old, for those that know a little bit about my background, my first company, Renew Data, we were one of we dealt with a lot of backup tapes. So it was like not only did you have to deal with the physical records when we were going through the warehouses, we find all these weird tapes as well. So it's always kind of a really cool opportunity to kind of bring those different technologies together. So we talked a little bit about the migration as a service opportunity. Tell us a little bit about specifically around Migrate and really some of the differentiators around how that it really brings to the table.
Yeah, so what Gimmal Migrate can do for you is get you out of some of the, and no offense meant, but things like OpenText, Documentum, file shares, which people still think that they would get rid of. Hard to get rid of a file share, but you can still migrate your data into a more recent platform like SharePoint Online, for instance. So with Gimmal Migrate, you have the ability to migrate that data full fidelity, including the metadata, so you're not losing that important information historically, and be able to take that data into SharePoint, and then you can also transform that data during that process. So you have the ability we have a product or a subproduct of Migrate called Map It. And what it does, it allows you to associate values that are in open text, documented file shares, and then with the proper SharePoint column, that would be inheriting that value, but also be able to transform that data. So it's a very powerful tool. And what's really cool about this is that it's not a cloud-based solution. It is actually runs on a desktop. So the process is being carried out by a desktop software. So your data is we're not moving your data into our repository. We're transferring it directly from any of the Documentum or OpenText platforms into SharePoint. Now we're using Azure Blob to be able to do that, but we're not into any Gimmal repository whatsoever doing this process. And so you're going to see the bullet points on the right-hand side that offer exactly what you need when doing this migration.
So one of the things that, tell us a little bit about the versioning side of things. I think that's really important because, there's so many different versions of some of these documents out there. And how is Gimmal Migrate identifying those versions, and what are the choices that we can typically make once we start looking at the policies?
Yeah, so depending on, once again, where the data is coming from, we have different versioning of each one of those, and we are cognizant of that and able to use those. So we can bring over not only the latest version of a file, we can bring over all the historical versions as well, or provide you with the option of saying how many of the previous versions do you want. So not only that, if you have any compound documents that are inside of your current repository, we can actually have those be properly managed as well by Gimmal Migrate. So it is a great tool to help you with a full migration from any of those more historical platforms into a current one like SharePoint Online.
Sure. And just for the record, could you give me a definition of what Azure Blob is? Because maybe some of the non-technical people that haven't worked with Microsoft, they may not be aware of
Yeah, basically what it allows us to do is store the information, because what we do is we create some text files, CSV files, what have you, during that migration process. But the real data is going to be, we're using actually Azure to help us with that, because there's an Azure, obviously, in the SharePoint Online connection. So the real data itself is being migrated by being pushed into Azure and then having Azure going to SharePoint Online. So it's a much faster and much more full fidelity process.
Right. And did you see a benefit of having a desktop versus a cloud app?
People are, if you're concerned about where that data is going, that's the only reason that I brought that up. Some people are still cloud adverse, of course, but for Gimmal Migrate, it is a desktop solution. So you don't need to spin up any additional hardware. We just need a desktop to run this process.
Right. And I see that you also are doing physical records. So how does that tie into Gimmal Migrate?
Yeah, that's part of the process as well. I mean, I don't want to get in too deep on that because I'll be honest, I'm not that familiar with that process. But yeah, that's something else we can help you with.
Right, because I think that ties into the physical side of things, right? Because then once you have the data scanned, you can then deal with the versioning and things along those lines.
Right.
So, and so what I have done a lot of work with you guys most recently on has been the Gimmal Discover tool. So this is a long and storied tool from the Sherpa and Mail Attender days. So this to me is pretty exciting because to me being able to dig and get insight on data is really, really key, right? So tell us a little bit about Gimmal Discover and what it does.
Well, Gimmal Discover is a hybrid SaaS solution, and what it does, it helps you manage various data sources. So obviously we do everything that's Microsoft-based, everything from the cloud, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange Online, as well as on-prem email for Exchange, PST files, Windows file shares. We've also branched out into Box and Google Workspace, both for Drive and email. We do OLEDB databases such as Oracle, SQL. And we also have gone into the endpoint, so we can actually manage data sitting on laptops, desktops for both Windows and for Mac. So what it gives is the administrator the ability to fully manage the data in any of these data sources. And what I mean by managed data, in fact, you're going to see in that larger of the two screenshots there, the three modules, data governance, classification, and e-discovery, being able to perform any of the policies or searches in those modules to either remediate and or locate data.
Well, and that's so huge, right? So I mean, I still love the the opportunity to actually dig into, workstations, right? Individual hard drives and laptops, right? And so, I mean, my original background was in computer forensics. So being able to reach in and be able to identify that, I think is such a huge, huge differentiator from a lot of the different tools that are out there.
It is, definitely, yes, you're right.
So, I think, one of the things that we've been able to do with Discover is really trying to figure out how, like what are the different data sources that are out there that you typically integrate and find, besides the desktops. Obviously, you can do like Microsoft 365, right? But what are some of the more common ones that are out there?
The most common ones are, quite honestly, getting into M365. So going through and performing remediation on email, also on OneDrive, because OneDrive's, let's be honest, we're all hoarders by nature. So we went from our desktop and from our file shares, and now we're hoarding everything in OneDrive. So to be able to go through, because OneDrive is supposed to be for temporary storage, right? It's not meant to be permanent storage. Not only that, but it's individually sensitive data. So to be able to go out and manage that, also in the SharePoint Online environments, all the SharePoint sites, to be able to find data, be able to classify, and classify meaning going through and discovering data by keywords, phrases, search expressions, or even regex, which can help you with credit cards, social security numbers, any PII, PCI kind of data, and be able to classify it so that when it comes time that you need to be able to look at that data, instead of having to go through 100 terabytes of data looking for that needle in the haystack, if we use the classification module, we can actually do proactively find the data that we will need in the future, classify with a label, and then it makes that processing much more expedited when it comes time to actually, when the rubber hits the road and we need to find that specific data.
Right, and that fits nicely into that data factory, right? Because once you classify it, that allows you to get more value out of it down the road, or at least determine what the usage is, right?
Because you know what you have, yes.
Because you know what you have. So, I mean, what about things like PDF files or, unindexable PDF files that don't have raw text out there? How do you actually identify, classify those? Is it just kind of fail out, or is there something that you guys do that's different?
Great question. So first off, we can go out and search, I believe it's over 220 different file types. I'll be honest, a lot of those I have no idea what they are. I'm an extension based. All the common ones that you would expect, including zip files and all permutations of zip, 7-zip and RARs and TARs. So we can actually search inside of those as well. And then for image files, so non-textual files like TIFFs or non-image or image-based PDFs, we have the ability to actually perform an OCR search on that. So we're not really converting the file. What we're doing is we're determining the text in those image files, searching it for the keywords, phrases that you specified, and then telling you if there's a match. But the file is going to be in the exact same format it was prior to us doing it. So there's no conversion. We're just, in essence, scraping that text out, being able to search it and tell you whether or not there was a binary match on it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to be able to have that without having to, basically convert it and then, OCR it and things like that. I think, gives you higher fidelity, better return rate. So that's cool. Yep. So what we do a lot with you guys, of course, is looking at it from a ROT perspective. So, this is a pretty big number, right?
It is. It's extremely large when you think about it. So here's the analogy I always make, Jason, when I talk to people about ROT, is you buy a new house. Are you going to go and take your closets, put it all in a box, and then get your new place and put it in a new closet? No, you're going to sort through it, figure out what you need, what you don't need, and throw away what you don't want. So with the ROT consumption, it's time. I mean, doing the migrations, great time to go out and do some remediation on that. But even if you're not migrating, being able to say, okay, I need to start realizing that I have a lot of obsolete data, which is typically the largest percentage of that. And to be able to determine, do I need to keep this? Is there any legal issues if I don't, regulations wise? So obviously conform to all those, but Discover allows you to configure the policies to be able to have it conform to exactly your needs. So with the ROT analysis, going through the redundant, obsolete, and trivial data is one of the things we're actually doing is we're having an offering that's going to allow you to go out and help you doing that assessment. So here's some of the challenges for doing a ROT analysis. First off, ROT versus non-ROT. So I talked earlier about Gimmal Discover and Gimmal Records having some synergy. Basically, my description is for rot, let Gimmal discover, find out what is the fork in the road, find out what is the rot versus a non-rot. Gimmal records can then formally disposition the non-rot data, and Gimmal discover can go and remediate the rot data. How do you determine what you're going to be using? Most likely it's going to be content. There's other metadata that can be used in this process. So you can go through maybe the folder it's in or the last access date, whatever metadata is available, depending on the data source, can be used for decision making. Determine what files need to be secured, such as, do I care about anything that's PHI for health or credit cards or social security numbers, anything that's personal or that's privileged, proprietary? What do I need to secure out there in my environment? Because quite honestly, a lot of that data sitting, especially on file shares, is dark data. You really don't know what's there. And there's no embarrassment saying that, because most companies are in the same position you are. We really don't need to know what we have. So figure out what needs to be life cycled. Does the data owner come into play at any of this? Can we leverage them to make decisions? Because does IT make the decision for everything? Doubtful. They're going to have to consult with somebody saying, is this important? They might carry out the process, but they're probably not going to be making those decisions on what you want and what you don't want. And then the labeling we talked about with the classification, being able to apply those labels. These all come into play to help you with your rot processing.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, right? And so, I mean, part of this is again, this is where, from our perspective, we're doing that transformation of the IG progress, right? Which is, how do we take these challenges? How do we overlay that with the technology that Gimmal provides, along with Kindato's professional services, right? Because not only can we take the data that we're getting from the information from the Gimmal technology, but now we can start applying some interesting intelligence. We've got all of the metadata, we've got all of the tagging and the classification that you have. We have
exactly. Yep, absolutely right. We lost you, Jason. So this is a slide about an offering that we're having here at Gimmal called the Sensitive Data Assessment. And what it does is allowing a client to go through and nominate a subset of their file share data. And then we're going to, on a binary sense, be able to tell you whether or not the data is sensitive. And we determine that by credit cards using regular expressions, and the same with social security numbers, but also allowing the client to specify the keywords, phrases, search expressions they want to find. And then we're going to get back are some artifacts regarding that. So you'll see that all on the left-hand side, all the different statistics that we have, including a number of image versus text files. So just give you some basic information about that. In this scenario, almost 14% of the data is sensitive. That's probably something that should raise your concern. Next slide. There we go, Jason. Thank you. So here's one of the slides we have, and what this is doing for you, just give me a little bar chart, give me some ideas. We did 10 different age range buckets, and you're going to see those on there. And what we're showing you is just a number of files in each one of those, and down in the bottom part of this report, you're going to see the breakdowns showing you not only the number of files, but also all the different statistics around this. So we can do these for the last access date, depending on the data source, of course. In this case, it's for file shares. Also the creation date and modification date, which any of those three can be used to allow you to make those decisions on your rot. Jesse, you want to go to the next slide for me? And then the last report that we show on this one is the files by extension. So if you want to know what extensions we have, in this case, I just had some typical data that you see here, but to give you a breakdown, because possibly the extension could also be used to determine rot data. Or MP4 is something you really need to have in your environment. Maybe you make movies for your documentation possibly, or maybe they're just pictures of somebody's kids or movies, home movies of something. So this gives you, once again, some more insight, because any of this data, any of this metadata can all be used in order to help you be able to make decisions on what is rot versus non-rot. Let's go to the next slide, Jason. Jason's having some audio problems right now. There we go. We're going to go ahead and go to questions, please.
All right, thank you so much. I am not seeing any questions as of right now.
Okay.
So we can always just give it a few seconds to wait until we have any submitted. If anyone wants to know where to submit your questions, you can click on the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen and submit them through there. And all questions are anonymous.
Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Obviously, I have very dodgy headphones. So thank you so much, Jeff, for picking up the pieces while we're there. But just to kind of wrap up the slides that you have. Again, information governance is really, really challenging, right? And part of it is not only there's so much technology that's out there, right? And you can see the power of what Gimmal has been working on in terms of trying to both identify and manage the data as it goes through that entire data factory. But I think one of the important things that many people forget is that the services and the insight that that Kindato has is really something that needs to be kind of wrapped around that particular technology. You can have a great hammer, but unless you really have the architectural plans to build a house, you're going to have some challenges out there. And so we would love the opportunity to be able to speak with you around some of these challenges that you're having, just to even talk about them. I spend a lot of time just talking to people around these particular issues, some of the things that they're seeing in the information governance marketplace. And I'm happy to share any of those insights at any time via LinkedIn, email. I'll even take semaphore, flag communications if it's really necessary. So I love to talk this stuff. And we'll actually be at the Information Governance World next week in San Diego. I know that Gimmal, you're sponsoring that as well, right?
Correct. Yes.
So we'll be there. I'm doing a presentation. I know you guys are doing a presentation, have some people out there. And in fact, those that may be out there, as a little side, we're actually having a barbecue, have some beers and barbecue with the Kindato folks. Nice. It'll be at the location where they filmed Top Gun, that scene at Top Gun.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Well, Jason, I want to say thank you very much, Jason, for allowing me to be part of this. It was truly an honor to do a webinar with you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate your insight and been really enjoyed the collaboration so far. And I know the clients that we've been speaking with and working with have been really pleased with the results that they're getting out of the services.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, everyone. Deja, thank you so much. I appreciate ACEDS and all the work you do, and keep everyone getting certified. And this is a great program, and I've been a benefactor and supporter of ACEDS from the early days. And so thank you for the opportunity to share our insights. And it's really, again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Deja.
Of course. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on the ACEDS webinar channel. Thank you again to our partner, Kindato, and of course, Jason and Jeff for an amazing presentation today. Please visit aceds.org for a complete list of our upcoming webinars. Have a great day, and we hope we can see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.